Well, thank you so much for, sorry, just drying up my tears. Um, your story is really, really impactful. And I really appreciate you sharing space and continuing, not just moving past the work that you were doing for your specific classroom in your specific town in your specific state, but rippling out to impact so many others through the continuation of things like LGBTQ History Month that is impacting folks still today. Um, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, the idea for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender History Month was to set aside a specific time in which we specifically and intentionally and consciously remembered and made an effort to do things like this conversation we're having tonight. I always in October Google LGBTQ History Month to see what's going on. And it's amazing to see all the different ideas that people have and different ways in which they mark the occasion and they highlight this history of ours. And book clubs are held, and lectures and dances and dinners and all sorts of film festivals. And it's just amazing. And you're right, it was done because I believe that history is empowering and important, and it helps us know our place in the world now and why things are the way they are now. And it provides lots of lessons for walking into the future. It provides a foundation from which we can grow and build our lives and our community. All of the reasons that Carter Woodson started, then called Negro History Week in 1926, all of those reasons are the same reasons that we started Hispanic Heritage Month and Women's History Month and Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Native American History Month, and then in 1994, LGBTQ History Month.
Yeah, huge. I did want to ask, and again, anyone who's tuning in, whether you be on Facebook Live or you are joining us here on Zoom, if you have some specific questions, we would love to be able to ask those to Rodney. So you can use the chat function as well as the Q&A function. But I want to start off, since we just talked about some of the placement of various history months and heritage months, what was the significance for October? Was there other movements or conversations around October that influenced your decision, or was it your decision? I would love to hear about that.
Yes, actually, in the initial proposal in January of 1994, I identified October as the month that seemed to be the best one. And the reasons were, it already had significance from National Coming Out Day, which started in 1988. So that occasion was to be 6 years old that October. And it was already quickly, it had been embedded in the community. So that seemed to be a nice hinge. Additionally, the first March on Washington, then called for lesbian and gay rights, was in 1979 in October. And the second one was in 1987 in October. Additionally, it needed to be a month within the academic calendar. So June or July would not work.
Yeah.
And it had to be a month that was at least partially free from other claims. And, you know, February, of course, since 1926 had been Black History Month, and Women's History Month in March since the 1970s. So all of those factors combined. You wouldn't want it in December, obviously, because everybody's going home. Colleges are shut down half the month. So October was really the best month at the time to select.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I completely was disregarding, or not disregarding, but the marches on Washington had slipped my mind. And I knew the timeline, but did not put the pieces together of Coming Out Day being something that was already established in 1994. So that makes a lot more sense. So thank you so much for educating me, and I'm sure other folks as well.
And I've noticed too, now we have Spirit Day,
Yeah.
which is in October. So there have been movements now to continue to add new
Hmm.
emphasis in different areas around the month of October, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. It looks like we might have, I'm seeing if we have a question hidden in this message. And it's not so much a question, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. It says, "Hi, Rodney. So great to see you. Recently, Professor Sally Gearhart, first out lesbian professor at San Francisco State University, has passed away. In the memorial, there was a mention of the omission in Dustin Lance Black's screenplay of the film Milk of her key role, invisibilizing of women is still happening even in our own community." And that's huge. I think that as we look at who is writing history, who are the folks who are at the helm of recording history, oftentimes compounded marginalized folks especially are either omitted, as our friend has said in this comment. But I think that is in general an issue with history of marginalized identities, which is why we have things like these various history months and heritage months. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, for example, in my K through 12 experience from 1970 to 1983 and my undergraduate experience, I recall one instance of reference to LGBTQ individuals, and that was in a social problems class in which we discussed drug abuse, violence, crime, abortion, homosexuality. And when I was in undergrad, I took a Black American history course. So it was American history, all the same stuff, but from the perspective and point of view and experiences and stories of African Americans. And then in grad school, I took the same class, but it was from the perspective of women. And I think my mind was open to so many things that I did not know about, so many areas in which my consciousness was not awake. And I think the same thing happens for a lot of people now when they take an LGBTQ history course, which are offered even in some secondary schools now. So it's the same story, the American story, but with a completely different point of view. And if we're going to get all of the stories, we have to look at the story from all of these perspectives. So the point made there in the chat, of course, absolutely correct.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as we look back at various moments in history, a lot of things can be tied back to systems of oppression, such as colonization and specifically religious framing of colonization. And as I was listening to the film, I viewed it previously before we watched this, so that lets you know. Second time watching it, still got a little teary-eyed. But something that was just, it baffles me, because this is a similar argument that oftentimes LGBT folks are faced with, and we can also see this in the realm of reproductive rights, is folks pointing to the Bible or pointing to religious texts to say the Bible doesn't like this and God doesn't like this. But frankly, and what is written in our laws is that there's a separation of church and state. Was there space for that type of conversation back in 1994? I'd love to hear your recollection or your perspective of, did anyone bring up like this? We were talking about this in historical context, regardless of your religious affiliation. This is history, and it should be objective. It should be a recollection of what happened, and not it being under the context of religion. I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my opinion then, and I expressed it often. You heard in the clip there a woman encouraging people to go home and read 1 Corinthians. And I remember the time there was also a radio station in St. Louis that was conservative, and it had a particular conservative religious host who talked about, he wanted to be another Rush Limbaugh, who's from Southeast Missouri. And I went on his show, and we had, I don't remember if it was 3 hours or 4 hours, a very long conversation, because I know the Bible about as well as anyone, having grown up with a religious mentality and a person curious about things. So I wanted to know what the Bible said myself. So I can go toe to toe with anyone in discussing that book. And my interpretation obviously is quite different now than it was then, and certainly quite different from theirs. Speaking though of the Bible, one thing that did happen at my high school shortly after that event in March 94, someone put under my door a piece of paper. And when I looked at it, it was Romans chapter 1, which is a particularly awful clobber verse. Romans chapter 1 in German, of all things, from a German Bible. I mean, incredible, the symbolism there of giving me a verse against homosexuality in a German language Bible, when the means by which I revealed the truth to my students was in context of a conversation about the Holocaust.
Wow. No, that's unfathomable to think of things happening like that, but unfortunately it obviously happens still in various situations today. But I think that someone took the time and detail to actually think of that rhetoric, puts it in a completely different, it hits differently, because then it hits down to the lesson was talking about various identities that were affected by internment camps and extermination camps. And wow, that's incredible. I'm going to check to see if we have any other questions in our chats. Doesn't look like we do, but don't worry, I am prepared. I would love to hear about if you had, what your support system looked like during that time, whether that be family, that be chosen family, community. I know in the documentary, you said that you weren't aware of any other LGBT identified educators, but there was another former educator from the school who said that there were. I'm curious to see if that was a support system that maybe you weren't aware of until years later.
Oh, I either didn't say that well, or maybe you heard it in a way a little off.
Possibly.
But yeah, no, there were a dozen gay and lesbian teachers in my high school, of about 110 or 115 teachers. I was the youngest of that group. We knew each other. We would get together even for like a Christmas dinner or something. And I had talked with many of them about what I felt increasingly compelled to do. And they were older. They had lived through the 1970s as educators, which was a very difficult time period for LGBTQ teachers. And their advice to me was, don't come out. If you do, wait at least until you have your tenured 6-year contract. But it just couldn't happen that way. That time frame would not work for me.
Sure.
But they were supportive, although there was some sense, though, of, well, now people know there can be a gay or lesbian teacher here. Before, it was don't ask, don't tell, don't think about. So there was a little bit of tension, I must say, between me and the other lesbian and gay teachers, because they felt sometimes I was going too far or pushing too much. But they still were a support, of course. And I had lots of friends, and I was out to all of my family, and my family was supportive. So I did have those structures. And I'm reading here, I see, it's Jeannie, who happens to be a friend of mine.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, I read the comment before I noticed who it was from. And it's her talking about she was teaching high school when all of this happened and so on. And she mentions there, it was like a window of hope. And I must say, I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility and even at times a burden that I had to be successful. I had to make it through this situation. I had to be granted that 5th contract and then the 6th tenured contract, because as Jeannie put it, a window of hope. If I had been let go, if they had terminated me or not renewed my contract, that window of hope would have come slamming down on a lot of fingers of a lot of LGBTQ students and educators and straight allied students and educators, because the message that would have been sent was, if you tell the truth, this is what happens. The chilling effect would have been enormous. So I had that consciousness also, and that deeply felt responsibility
Yeah.
to make this work.
Wow. I can't imagine what that pressure must have felt like. It looks like we might have a couple more questions. We have the question, what is your hope for the future of LGBTQ History Month? For example, in an academic setting or a workplace?
Well, I hope that what we see with Women's History Month and Black History Month and all the others, that will continue to increase in terms of acceptance across the board. And we will see workplaces and educational institutions and businesses and community groups and government institutions recognize LGBTQ History Month in October, do something to promote it. I think it's really crucial. And we've seen a few setbacks of late. If you've been following the news, there have been some LGBTQ teachers who have resigned or been fired. There have been school boards and some state legislatures trying to pass prohibitions against like a pride flag in a classroom and so on. So we have to be vigilant, because history makes it clear that with every step or two forward, there is a response. And generally you can hold the turf that you've gained, but sometimes there's an overwhelming onslaught and you lose that turf. So we have to remain vigilant. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have another question. With so much at stake professionally and personally, how did you muster the courage to be the first to be out?
Well, there were other out teachers in other states. I'm sure I knew a couple of them. In Missouri, it hadn't happened yet. And I think it simply had to be. One reason, very practical, was that the January 1994 proposal about that October's inaugural Lesbian and Gay, then called History Month, that was beginning to gain steam and momentum. I was receiving endorsements from various community organizations and institutions and people, forming a board that would try to coordinate it on a national level. And that was going to be public information. So even if I hadn't taken the initiative, eventually the information would have gotten out. And I think it's disempowering for a teacher to have a secret that students begin to learn and pass around amongst themselves. I think a teacher has to protect, their role in the classroom, which is as the supervisor of the classroom. And you can't do that if there are whispers behind the teacher's back about something someone saw somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question. I am a teacher and an educational doctoral student in Louisville, Kentucky. My dissertation focus is on the heteronormative aspects of schools and the decisions that queer teachers face in coming out. First, thank you for your bravery. Second, what do you feel like has been the biggest barrier to change currently in schools?
That's a great question. And my social media is at Rodney C. Wilson. I'd like to hear from Brent about this, actually, the dissertation he's working on. I think one barrier is that we do not yet have national civil rights that includes sexual orientation and gender identity completely. Now, we had the Supreme Court case a year ago that was wonderful, but we need to be written into the Civil Rights Act specifically and explicitly and clearly, because a lot of people feel when there's not that protection that's absolutely clear, they are more at risk. Here in my state, Missouri, we do not have in Missouri law protection for sexual orientation and gender identity. We've been trying to get that done for 30 years. We can't get it through our 70% Republican legislature. So I think that would be one of the barriers, that people need to know they're not going to lose their home because they lose their paycheck because they get terminated from a position. They need to know that they're not going to lose their ability to provide food on the table for themselves, their partners, their loved ones. So I think we need to really be pushing nationally, and in every state that doesn't have explicit civil rights protection, we need to push that. And another thing we need to do is make certain that we pay attention to school board elections. As inconsequential as they might seem, they are not. They have consequences. For example, in my case, in 1995, March, there was a school board election. There were people running who would not have renewed my contract. There were people running who would renew my contract. The good news is those two candidates won. My contract was then immediately renewed. So there are consequences to who we have on school boards. So we do need to pay attention to those. And I know we're overwhelmed by all the elections that we have to pay attention to and all the issues we have to stay up on, and we all need a break from it. But we have to pay attention, or the side that doesn't believe we should have a place at the table will take control of the table.
Yeah, and I think we've seen what happens when that happens at the national level. So really making sure that we're not letting that happen at a local level. And for anyone who is tuning in Franklin County, you can go ahead and early vote. This weekend, there is a large event called No Tricks, Just Votes down at the Franklin County Board of Elections on Morse Road. So you should check that out. Take your friends, take your family. There'll be lots of entertainment, some local LGBT music performances. So just echoing everything that Rodney has said, as whether it is a presidential year election or an election like this year, there's a lot at stake. In Columbus specifically, there's everything from our city council members, which we can see has hugely influenced over the past few years, if you weren't already aware. So definitely go out and vote. I did want to ask, when we're talking about tenure and the protection of educators, there was some conversation about it in the documentary around the influence of the teachers union. And as I know that you know, as a history teacher, that there's a long history of collaboration amongst the labor movement as well as the LGBT movement. I would love to hear your perspective of what that looks like and maybe more context than what we received in the documentary.
The National Education Association, which is the union I was a member of, at that time it had about 2.2 million members. It has been ahead of the curve on this issue for a long time. Wow. I was attending in DC at headquarters various seminars and various functions about the role of lesbian and gay, then lesbian and gay, now LGBTQ teachers and educators. So they were ahead of the curve. They also provided for me an attorney. The Missouri NEA, the Missouri affiliate to the national, provided an attorney to me during all of that process, which of course was helpful, because if the school district was aware that an attorney would be protecting my interest, they would be less likely to inflict harm upon me. So the NEA is very good. The AFT also is very good on this issue and trying to protect all teachers and protect all students and make certain that our educational institutions are safe places where everyone can learn, everyone can grow, everyone can evolve, everyone can reach their potential and become the person they're supposed to be.
Fantastic. I think as we're talking about the various, whether it be within our conversation and context of the video or what we've shared now, we've talked about protection through unions, we've talked about protection through tenure. As someone who oftentimes doesn't process criticism or saying like, oh, well, you received this because of this, I can oftentimes internalize that. I can't help but imagine, or if you can share some of what was going on in your head of, I'm an excellent teacher. I teach well, my students are excelling, I'm able to provide curriculum in an interactive and engaging way. Why is this not enough? Or why, I can't imagine maybe hearing the rhetoric of, well, the only reason you have a job is because of the union, or the only reason you have the job is because those two people got elected during the school board. How did you process that?
Boy, that's a deep question. Yes, it should have been just enough, and it should be for everyone, just enough that you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
All of these other issues should not be part of the equation. You're good at what you do, and that's enough for us. Now, unfortunately, we don't live in that world always. And I have to say too, would the outcome have been different if I were not white and cisgender?
Huge.
I think the outcome would have been different. In fact, maybe I wouldn't have been hired in the first place. We had a school district of 110 or 15 teachers. We had one African-American teacher, and she left. She couldn't take it in that school district any longer. So I think there are all sorts of factors that went into protecting me. I think the media's involvement was one as well, because the school district was aware that if they did the wrong thing, which was to let me go, they would do it in the light of day, because the media would cover it. So I felt some protection there as well. So I think there were a lot of factors, but yeah, we need to create a world in which what matters is, can you effectively do this job no matter what? Great, come on in. That's all that should matter.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any other external questions, and we're coming up on time. So I would love to end on, you had mentioned in the documentary, getting messages from former students saying your example or your actions as a closeted student have impacted me as a queer adult. I would love to hear, do you have a standout memory or a standout impact that a former student has shared with you?
I do. There are several, but one that jumped to mind, at the end of the day, I opened my door. This would have been a couple of months after these events. It could have even been the fall of the next year, so maybe 6 months later. I don't recall precisely the time frame, but I opened the door at the end of the day, and there was a young man seated in the floor up against lockers. And I had not actually known this student. He wasn't in my class, but he was a student there at the time these things were happening. And I think it just graduated. And he came back to say how important it was to him that now his high school had a gay teacher who was open about it, and what an impact it would have had on him if he had been a student there in my classroom, knowing he was gay, as he had since he was young. So that really exemplified to me how important it is that we have all kinds of teachers, all kinds of people in front of us as we're growing up. I think it's incredibly important. I missed out. I've not had in K through 12 or in undergrad a single African-American teacher.
Wow.
That's terrible. What did I miss out on as a result of that? What sort of ideas and thoughts did I have in younger years because of that? So we really need to just open the doors, open the windows, let everyone in and see what we can create together as one people, supporting each other, taking care of each other, and trying to make the world the best it can be.
That's fantastic. And it all starts with education. It all starts with teachers. So along with bringing in various identities into the teaching profession, also providing space to where we are taking care of our teachers, compensating them, as well as allowing access to mental health resources, because I can't imagine being an educator now generally, but thinking and hearing the rhetoric and the vitriol that people were throwing at your way. I would hope that as we move forward, we think, as we are thinking of election days and how we vote, think of how we take care of our teachers and our educators, because that directly affects the way that students are learning and how they're learning and what they're learning. So as we are coming up on time, I just want to say thank you again, Rodney, for your dedication to our community, the work that you've done and continue to do, as well as taking time through your busy schedule to spend some time with us and share your story here.
This was a pleasure, Zach. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to listen to us.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you love this program and other programs, you can check out stonewallcolumbus.org and look at our events calendar. Coming up to finish up LGBTQ History Month, we have a gay home movie. If you are local here in Columbus, it is a documentary in progress by Jeff Story. So if you want to learn more about that, you can check that out on our events calendar. And that's going to be this Sunday, October 31st at 3 p.m. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you spending some time, and we hope you have a great rest of October and LGBT History Month. Take care, everybody.